Welcome to GDPR in under 5 minutes. My name is Don Vandemark. This video is part of a series to help non-technical executives approach technical topics. This is one of our less technical topics, but more legal ones. So we have a disclaimer at the bottom that this is not legal advice and you should consult with a lawyer for more specifics. In summary, GDPR applies to any personal information about any EU citizen. You must know whether your business is categorized as a data controller or a data processor. Main considerations are consent, breach notification, right to be forgotten, and data portability and access. Finally, fines can reach as high as 20 million euros or 4% of global turnover, which is an EU term for revenue. GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation. Enforcement for it started on May 25th of 2018, and it applies to any EU citizen. The EU is comprised of the countries on the map that are colored in, and it applies to any citizen of those countries that are end users of those systems, whether or not you are based in Europe or have business relationships with any companies in Europe. One of the more complicated tasks for GDPR revolves around the data portability and right to be forgotten sections. This talks about the ability for a user to ask you to delete their data or to provide an export for it. In order to do a lot of this, the first thing you're going to need to do is identify all the personal data that you've stored on your systems. You'll want to remove any data that you're storing unnecessarily, either because it was just easy to import or for other reasons, because that's going to make it easier to delete later. You'll then want to map how you will export and/or delete a user's data when a request comes in. There are two categories of companies for GDPR, the data controller and the data processor. The data controller is the entity that has the relationship with the end user. They're usually ones the end user knows they're using. The data processor acts on behalf of the data controller, doing more advanced processing of the data. The data controller is responsible for managing the consent with the user, which is not only getting initial consent, but continuing to maintain it as well. In addition, they need to have a clear privacy notice, which means that it can no longer be wrapped in legalese. It must be understandable. The data processor is responsible for managing any sub-processors they use, which includes hosting services. Finally, Article 37 of the GDPR describes the criteria for appointing a data protection officer. We don't have time to go into that now, so review that to see if it applies to your company. The GDPR has also raised the standard for breach notification. Data controllers have 72 hours to report a breach to its users from the time they are aware of it. That means that the data controllers are going to need to have even tighter deadlines from their data processors in order to meet the 72-hour window. Here are some action steps to take to get started with GDPR compliance. First, get legal advice. Make sure a lawyer helps you determine if you're a data controller or a data processor. If you're a data controller, get consent from your users and work with your data processors on breach notification. Identify all the personal data you store and how you're going to delete it and/or export it. Finally, pay attention to early GDPR enforcement cases, because we're going to have to see how and what the enforcement agencies are going after. We will create additional videos as enforcement cases come in that start to help define how GDPR is being enforced. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.